Okay, let's create the article. I'm going to take the article that's on the left, mimic it with a layout on the right hand side, but instead of using a 5-column layout, let's use a 4-column layout. In order to get the tops of the articles to line up, I'm going to drag a column guide. Using Control-click, I drag it down so that I can line up the title on the left hand side with the title on the right hand side. To enter text, I click on the text tool. I can click and drag a text frame onto the page. It's snapping to the guidelines and the column guides. I can then type a title. I'll highlight all of the text and change it. This text over here is AYT Genuine. And I can play with the size of the text until it gets to be as big as I'd like it to be in my layout. We'll come back to this in a moment. Typically, what I would like to do in my newspaper is take the element that is the byline, copy it, paste it, drag it into position. If I stretch it across, the line in the background will stretch, so does the little box that's here. So typically I'd want to leave it the way it is. I'll undo that and leave it its original size. I would then be able to click the text tool and change the name of the writer and the position of the writer. You select File, Place, go looking for the file. I have a file here. It's not the same as the one that was used to compose the article on the left hand page, but it's much longer, which will give us better examples. When I select that, the cursor becomes loaded. It changes to an icon that appears to be text that is flowing in a paragraph. I can click anywhere in a column and it places that text. It runs out of room at the bottom. You can see that by the little red plus symbol. If I click on that plus symbol, it loads the cursor again, and I can click in another column where it continues flowing. And again, it runs out of room, so I'll click the plus, load the cursor, click the plus, load the cursor a final time. So I now have 4 columns. I can adjust the columns and you'll see how the text flows. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see that the text itself definitely needs to be formatted. First, let's work with the font. If I click on the text tool, select inside one of my text frames, Control A to select everything, and let's change the font to a much more elegant body copy font. One of my favorites is AYT Grotesque, and we will go to 9 point. I know it looks very small, but max 10 as a font size for a body copy font. Next, I'd like to have my text justified and work on the indents. I can do that using the paragraph or under Type, Paragraph. I get the paragraph palette. Let's first justify all lines except for the last line. And we'll zoom in just slightly. I would like to indent each paragraph. When you have your writers write for you, they should be writing unformatted text, 1 to 2 sentences per paragraph. Leave the formatting to your layout people. The first line indent in my paragraph palette is right here. I'm going to go to 1 pica 6, which ends up being 1/4 of an inch. Perfect tab. Sometimes people will have tabs in their copy and it'll look like that, a little too indented. You'll need to edit those out. The easiest way to edit the article is to right click on it and select Edit in Story Editor. This brings up an editor that's a little easier to use. You can make your changes in here, and then when you click the close button, it goes back to the document. Now let's view the page as a whole and work with the layout of the article itself. If I were to use 3 columns, maybe have my title span over the 3 columns, I would want my title to be a little bigger, so I'll highlight all of its text, and with the size, increase the size of that text. I don't like the hyphenation there, so I'll press enter. I've got a nice big bold title to go with my article, which is quite sizable. I've got my byline here, and my article starts off right underneath the byline. To view the page without guideline interruption, I will just click off of it there. I can get a feel for it without the interference of the guidelines. Going back, I do want my next two columns to line up, so I'll drag a guideline to the top. We'll line up our byline with the second and third columns. And now, because I've got that extra space on the third column, I'm going to bring up another guideline for the bottom of my article. Just a little too much. A couple more lines in the first column and the second column. And I've got a fairly nice fit. Make sure that that third column lines up with my guidelines. If I end up with a little bit of space at the end of the final column, I might wish to highlight all of the text and work with the spacing after each paragraph. By increasing slightly, I can get the third column to fit almost, and when I zoom in, it's hardly noticeable on the actual text itself. The other thing that I can do is take that first column and move it down slightly if I need to. Now let's insert a graphic. The same way that I inserted text, File, Place, go looking for a graphic. I have links here. Let's take the Just Games or the Toronto Pan Am 2015 graphic. It loads my cursor. The cursor is slightly different in appearance. When I click and drag, it throws the graphic in there. Now I can't see it at the moment because that graphic may be too big. There it is. So what I need to do is size my frame, select my frame, select Object, Fitting, Fit Content Proportionally. That's very important, especially with photographs, because you don't want to skew the image in horizontal or vertical directions. To get the text to flow and not touch the actual graphic, I go to the text wrap window, and I have a number of different buffers around each graphic. I can use this one here, which gives me a uniform gap of 0 pica 10. I can decrease that slightly. You'll notice how the text flows. The next thing is that I would like to shift it around and just do a squint test to make sure that it flows around the graphic nicely. I'm going to take the bottom of each of these columns because I feel that this will be a full page article, and I was correct. I can take that last column and delete it. I'm going to work with the spacing after slightly, do a quick squint test to make sure that it fits around my graphic. The last thing you want to do when you've got an article laid out is group all of the elements that go into the article itself. So I highlight all of the elements. I've got the graphic, the byline, the title, and all of the columns that go into the article. Select Object, Group. The reason for doing that is so that when I'm composing the newspaper, I don't have to move each one. I can move just the one grouped object and move it into position. I can cut a grouped object, move to a new page, edit, paste in place, and put it wherever I want on the new page.